Hi, welcome to Gender Nebula's 36 with me, Miss Freda Wallace, and the lovely
Victoria Hodges.
Am I pointing in the right direction when I
You
do
are
that?
for once, yeah, but I think your fingers outside the edge of your little box that keeps you under control.
Well, I'm back in action now because been off for a week because I had some dental work done and my mouth swelled up and
And you couldn't speak.
I couldn't speak. Like women couldn't speak. So
You've been silenced by the dentist.
yeah, bloody dentist silencing us.
Silencing women. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and yeah, so I've been doing that, and I've had a bit of beauty done. Can you
Have
tell?
you? What have you had done?
I mean, you can't tell.
I don't. Go on, explain
I've
what
had
you've had done.
I've had my lips injected with chemicals and the
Okay.
cheek. So it's quite nice. It feels weird, like a brand new handbag.
So is that like a lip filler? Is it a filler?
Yeah, it's like it's not Botox.
No,
It's a
because
different.
Botox is to get rid of the lines, isn't it? But
Yeah, it's a filler
so it's a
kind of
lip
thing.
filler, and it's also you can inject it
Yeah,
into anything that wants filling, I guess.
yeah. But I love syringes, and when I saw with the rubber gloves, and I was like, oh yeah, put that in me. Yeah. So
So what is it that goes in there? I don't know.
what the actual
Yeah,
substance?
what is it?
It's called Ristylene. No, that's for teeth. That's Ristylene. Do you know what? I forgot what it's called. I should have written it down. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just a chemical that makes you beautiful.
Well, it's probably not a chemical. It's probably like a fluid of some sort which is safe for your
I don't know where
face.
it's derived. I just assume it's safe. I don't know.
So how long does it last? Or do you have to have it redone?
Well, they said about 6 months, so
6 months. Okay.
it's not really settled down yet. Because,
So what, is
like,
it bottom lip and top lip, or
yeah,
so
and
both lips and
cheeks,
cheekbones? Okay.
yeah, and just here a little bit. But the lady was really good, and she was telling me she was a bit of a saleswoman, but she's lovely. And she was saying you can have this, and you just come back to me when you want anything else. And she was telling me about other procedures they can do. I was like, oh my God, they're like, sign me up. I'll pay you a fee every month, and I'll come back for something different.
I can't imagine it's cheap.
No,
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 we don't. We don't start talking about that.
no. But it's a little treat for myself, because um, I did think about having like facial feminization surgeries and things like that. But really, they're so expensive, aren't they? And just a little bit of something gives you a bit of confidence and a boost. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying I advocate for it. I'm just saying it's something that makes me feel
Hey, if it
nice,
makes you feel better, go for it.
Yeah,
That's what I say.
yeah. But yeah, it's quite expensive. But everything is nowadays.
Yeah, anything, yeah, like that is.
So, what have you been up to?
Oh God, let me think. Working. I've been working,
Oh,
and I've been working,
yeah.
and I've been sleeping, and I've been working. I mean, yeah, that's it.
So nothing particular. You've not been anywhere, or
Had my nails done yesterday. Had
see
my
that is
eyebrows done
exciting.
yesterday. That's exciting.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Show me your nails. They're lilac.
Yeah, like a lilac-y,
I've had a disaster.
pinky
Look at
colour.
this. Can you see my? I don't know if you can see on
Oh,
the.
you've
I've got
lost
a
one now.
miss. Yeah.
See, I these are not acrylics. These are just gels.
I've just got to
So
remember
they only last they
we're
only last like 3 weeks. Then they
do
start
an
picking
audio
off.
podcast as well, don't we? So we're talking about
Yeah.
things you can see on the screen at the moment. So I'm really sorry, but I look
Sorry.
gorgeous, and I've lost a nail in a fight with a duvet cover. So right.
That tells you all you need to know.
So yeah, the first topic we cover a lot of pink news, don't we? Because I think
We do. Pink
Jen,
News seems to be the source of most of
yeah,
our stories because
yeah.
not everybody else really covers it. So let me
Well,
let me let me magically shrink us down to our small selves. There we go.
well, there is a thing with pink news where they do good stuff. I mean, for me, there are a couple of good news sources, and one of them is Pink News, and the other one I always go to is Byline Times because the people and Vice,
Yeah,
obviously,
Vice International News is quite good.
there are some really good writers
There's
that
probably others. I don't know if there's any others, but those are the ones I kind of look at.
but they are the only thing. Sometimes the only voices that are actually in support of us. They don't have a
Yeah, BBC, ITV sometimes have half
BBC's
decent ones.
terrible.
Yeah, but Channel 4 has some good ones now and again. But yeah, it's mainly PinkNews.
Yeah. So the
So
first story is about
let me bring the first topic in here. Here we go.
Kathleen Stock and Julie Bindel, and I think a couple of other fringe trans-exclusionists have come out with the Lesbian Project.
They have
Now,
indeed.
interestingly, the Lesbian Project seems to set itself aside from being part of other, LGBT group. This is what they're trying to divide themselves from the LGBTQI acronym, aren't they? The same way that LGB Alliance do. And it's to say what they're actually saying is we don't agree with the T and the Q and anything
Yeah,
past
so
that
it was this lesbian project. It was a group created exclusively for cisgender lesbians in reaction to trans inclusion in LGBTQ spaces.
Yeah.
And the really funny thing is here that on their new website there's an image of two people, and they just happen to be a trans and non-binary person.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's a bit of an error. It's so
I find
stupid,
it so ironic.
They?
Here's a website which is trying to exclude trans and non-binary, and what do they go and do? They go and use an image, a stock image of a trans and non-binary person on their prestigious new website.
Yeah, I'm aware that not everybody knows the history of Kathleen Stock and Julie Bindel and what they do. I mean, they've got a long kind of history now of writing thesis, and obviously Kathleen Stock wrote the book Material Girls, which is basically a collection of arguments against non-binary and trans identity. It's like I just find it like she's looking for bias that supports that view, and that's how it works. And obviously Julie Bindel is the same kind of she writes stories that frame trans people as a threat. That's what a job seems to be. So this, I'm just it pleases me that this has happened, because it's just so it's exactly the kind of daft thing that would happen to them, because they're so blinded by their own single-minded, authoritarian, purist kind of vision of what they want the world to be, that they oversee and miss out a bit of their own publicity. And it just plays into that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just shows that you couldn't even find some real pictures. You had to go and get stock pictures, and you chose the wrong ones.
Yeah, and obviously, Julie Bindel this week has said that I've called her ugly on Twitter, and I find it really childish.
Yeah, I'm sure that was
what you want about? I mean, like I'm going to address this now, because I have tweeted about it.
Maybe you've said she's used ugly language.
Yeah, I think I have, but I never ever,
not
especially
to anybody's.
I never refer to anybody as ugly, but by saying that, what her tweet does is it actually calls me ugly. It's like saying, "Oh, look at the state of," because you mentioned India Willoughby, and what the actual angle of that tweet is, "Oh, look at these two calling me ugly. Look at the state of them."
That's what she said.
It's just schoolyard
bullying.
It's so sick, and it didn't work out well for her, because people support me and say, "Go give us the evidence, Julie," and obviously dead silence then from her.
Yeah. So
anyway, that's a bit of a side issue.
This lesbian project was launched 9th of March by Kathleen Stock, Julie Bindel, and it's also got the tennis star
Martina Navratilova.
Martina Navratilova as a patron.
And what does she have in common with them? It's not lesbians, is it? It's about being trans-exclusionary. This is why I keep posting. When we were in the LGBT Foundation office last week, and I was picking up those new resources and educational things. Well, the thing on the wall says "Dykes for Trans Rights."
Yeah,
that's amazing. And I keep posting that, because that's.
So since this launch, I mean, these two have been on LBC, Woman's Hour, Telegraph, GB News, etc., to explain how they and other lesbians are being silenced and erased from society.
Well, this is the one thing the BBC keep doing, and it's very infuriating because they think that
Well, how can you be erased and silenced from society when you put on pretty much every news show that's out there?
I'm just the when they're on shows like Woman's Hour, they can be moderate and they can seem to the casual listener like, oh, actually, Kathleen Stock might have a point there because lesbians do need space and lesbians should have their own representation. That's not what Kathleen Stock is saying. She is saying she doesn't want to be included in the bigger, more inclusive picture of what pride events and things like that. It's a kind of ultra conservative view of what it is to be a lesbian, and I can't talk necessarily about that because I know lesbians that are very vocal about that, and I would always say this is your flaw. This is your experience more than mine, obviously. But for someone like Kathleen Stark, she would assume that I am co-opting the role of a lesbian, or I'm invading the space of a lesbian. It always has to be that kind of aggressive language with them, because if they actually did succeed in this, how they're going to have group meetings? How are they going to check who's a lesbian for real and who isn't? What if she's a bi woman? What if she's just coming out as lesbian and it's not going to be a very inclusive atmosphere if you have to prove that you're a lesbian to Kathleen Stock. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's completely ridiculous.
I think I'd much rather be involved in something like LGBT foundations.
Exactly, because you can always find your own little niche within that umbrella. Yeah. You don't have to go out. We know what motivates these people.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was ironic, using those pictures. It's just like,
yeah, it's funny. It's just
on earth.
I mean, LGB Alliance do this kind of thing all the time, don't they? Where they think they've got something sewn up and they've made that post that is like the killer post.
About shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, they're always doing it because when you have to be that single-minded about your vision or puritanical, that's when you slip up.
Yeah.
Because you can never be that consistent, really. Human beings are flawed, contradictory, and hypocritical. That's what makes us human.
All right, this next story is our friend Joe Biden.
Joe. So what's he up to this week?
Well, Joe Biden slams Ron DeSantis cruel attacks on LGBTQ.
You say Rhonda DeSantis, but the drag name is Rhonda DeSantis.
Yeah, well, I'm calling Ron DeSantis.
That's my drag name. My drag name is Ron DeSantis.
Your drag name is slightly different, yeah.
Mm.
So Joe has slammed Rhonda for their cruel attacks on LGBTQ rights as close to sinful. I'm not quite sure I would have said close to sinful. I think I would have said, yeah, it's very sinful.
I'd say it's abhorrent.
Abhorrent, yeah.
I think using the word sinful kind of...
It's kind of... I think what's behind this is the fact that Rhonda is probably going to be the person that Joe's up against in the next election. If Rhonda, gets the Republican backing instead of Trump.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what's behind it. I don't know.
It's looking increasingly more like it is going to be Rhonda. But...
she's not good news for us, by the way, or Florida.
You're going to obviously see the ramping up of rhetoric against us, we've already seen the clear use of the LGBT rhetoric against us. Like it's they'll weaponize anything to scare voters into voting for them. So if they can find instances of drag queens dancing in front of scared children, they will weaponize, and that's what these accounts on Twitter are all about. It's like a sort of psyop that certain accounts are boosted, and there are some that will be just completely bot driven, and it's all about scaring fence-sitting voters into voting for them. And if they can provide evidence that, the world's going mad, the world's going woke, and we are the solution to that, they'll use that. And that's all it's about. They don't have any answers. They just want
Let me just read
power.
out some of the article here.
It's the will to power, isn't it?
The Democratic president made the comments during an interview with the Daily Show's Cal Penn. I guess that's some US show. He specifically commented on the volume of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation being proposed and enacted in Florida. What's going on in Florida is, as my mother would say, close to sinful, Joe Biden said. It's just terrible what they're doing. The worrying wave of so-called anti-woke legislation has been spearheaded by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who has enacted and advocated policy restricting LGBTQ rights. So,
and it's
I mean,
we've
spoken about Ronda in the past, haven't we? I mean, he's doing some pretty awful things with laws in Florida.
I mean, I'm not sure who the other candidates are yet for a presidential election, so I need to look at that. But I don't think it's going to be Trump, because even though Trump.
Well, Trump's been there, hasn't he? He's done it. I'm not sure the Democrats are going to want to go down that road again.
Because he's a liability.
Sorry, the Republicans, not the Democrats.
I mean, they're all a liability, but I think the way that Trump embarrasses them a little bit too much. It's a bit like how it's like some people like to pretend they're moderate and hide behind that, where Trump kind of exposes it all as a bit of a farce. And that's why Trump appeals to people in a way. It's like there are some people who probably don't care about politics that much will want Trump because it's entertainment. It's almost like politics is a kind of entertainment now. So there will be people cheering on Trump who work in the media, who work in, in newspapers, because it sells stuff.
Yeah,
and
I mean, just to kind of get back to that point about all the laws that have been passed in the US recently. It says Florida encapsulates the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric in the US today. Almost 400 bills targeting LGBTQ rights have been proposed across the US since the beginning of 2023, easily surpassing last year's total of 306. This is according to data collected from the American Civil Liberties Union.
Well, you've also got to look at, women's reproductive rights in this.
Yeah, everything's
because there are women suing Texas state because they've been denied abortions which could have been the pregnancy was life-threatening, or this was like the first sign of, to me, when that Roe versus Wade ruling was overturned, that the people that Trump has now put into, a bit like the way Boris put those idiots in charge in our cabinet, these are the people. This is how things slip very easily into a kind of authoritarian and nationalistic rhetoric, and then the damage of that is minorities or women who just want to access healthcare in the same way trans people do, in the same way anybody does, really.
Yeah,
it's like a filtering down of hate.
Yeah, after becoming 46th governor of Florida in 2019, DeSantis almost immediately began a campaign against anything he deemed woke, which is anything that furthers the rights of marginalised people. This includes vetoing almost $900,000 worth of funding for victims of the 2016 Pulse massacre, lodging complaints against drag queens, appointing anti-LGBTQ plus pundits to various school committee boards, and rescinding rights for Disney. So he's on a campaign, of anti-wokeness, as they call it.
Yeah, it's just that's what you hear all the time now, isn't it? I mean, the BBC don't say it, but that's what they mean when they start talking about having more balanced views from the right. It's like, no, you don't. There's no balance there. You're just using that. I talk about the BBC a lot because I listen to a lot of BBC Radio 4. And what I've noticed is this wokery idea, which GB News, Talk TV will talk about with abandon. They just say, trans people are taking over, basically. But what the BBC do, they do it I think they do it in a more dangerous way, because we can laugh at we can laugh at Talk TV and we can laugh at GB News to an extent, but the BBC are presenting something that has some kind of authority. So, and the way the presenters do it, as we've seen with Gary Lineker just recently, they're not allowed to have an opinion, but they do, because they will platform people who are having the opinion for them.
It's much more subtle on the BBC. Yeah,
it's cloak and dagger.
Yeah, very much
So, like, imagine if I was a producer at the BBC and I was working with a presenter, I would say, like, you can't say you support this, but we found somebody that does. But in that meeting, that presenter will have an opinion, but he can't have it, or she can't have it on air. So what will happen is, in that meeting, pre-production, it's already decided who's, what they support. So it's like there was an instance on Radio 4 this week. There's a show called Antisocial. Now, on that show, they were talking about sex education in schools. And one of the guests was from a lobby group called Save Our Schools. The Save Schools Alliance, right? Which sounds, on the face of it, sounds, yeah, everybody wants to save schools. But they're an anti-LGBT lobby group that are campaigning to bring back Section 28. Now, the other guest was a teacher. Just a teacher. She's not representing any group. She doesn't have the power to represent a union. She doesn't have any other interests but teaching children about sex. And those two people were put together as if it was balanced. So I complained. I actually wrote to the BBC about that, because I said, that's not balance. That's a powerful lobby group with a lot of funding being put in a room with somebody that has to defend.
Yeah, putting up against one teacher.
And that happened to our friend Steph, because she was on that show previously when they were talking about that trans prisoners.
Oh, was that the I can't remember the name of the show. Was it that?
It's called Antisocial.
Oh, yeah.
And the presenter, oh gosh, names do escape me.
So it's a bit like a radio podcast
Adam Fleming, I think he's called.
Radio. It's like a podcast thing, isn't it? On radio.
And
which radio station is it on? Is it
Radio 4?
4, yeah. Right.
And what Adam Fleming does is he plays the role of a kind of mediator. But he's not.
But he's not. Yeah, I've listened to him. He's not.
He's not a mediator because
he's on one side slightly. Yeah.
It's not that he's on one side slightly. He's working for the organisation that has put a lobby group in the way of somebody that just teaches children about sex. And the woman that was on that, Tanya Smith, I think it was something like that. But she's been on GB News.
When was this on then? I'm going to have a listen to this.
She's been on LGBT Alliance panels.
Was this on this week?
Yeah. Right, this was not brought up at all in the discussion. So as far as the public are concerned, who don't understand this stuff, they're listening to a lady who wants to keep schools safe. Safe from what? Teaching them about gay people. That's what she's actually getting at. Yeah. Anyway, I know that was a bit of a tangent, but I was talking about the way the media and I'm just getting back to
the BBC. I mean, we've had the Gary Lineker thing, and then we also had the question time thing with Fiona Bruce, haven't we? When they're talking about.
So the BBC, I mean, the thing with Gary Lineker, it really did expose it to a wider audience, a football crowd, who actually like Gary Lineker, because he's a decent guy. He's not an arsehole. And
I think they've come to some arrangement now. I'm not sure what it is. He's back on TV tonight.
But he should. But is he going to back down now and stop tweeting? That's what.
Well, what he said is that he's not going to tweet whilst the BBC reviews its policy on.
That's terrible. Gary Lineker. But I'm not Gary Lineker.
No, he's agreed to do that until they've done the review, and then he'll
see that to do that. To me, the moral thing to have done there for Gary Lineker is said, stuff your job. I don't want to.
Yeah, I would have walked. If I was Gary Lineker, I would have walked.
I mean, he loves football, so bless him.
He's not like he's. It's not like he's going to be unemployed.
I think he'll be in talks now with other broadcasters.
Yeah, you may well see him disappear over the next few months.
I don't know how long the BBC contract is, obviously. But if that's up for renew, I don't think he's going because
he could get a much better deal at somewhere like Sky.
But the BBC could make a lot more money. But the BBC have shot themselves in the foot yet again.
Well, I mean, the point I was making, it's not just what happened with Gary Lineker. There was another incident with Fiona Bruce. There's been other incidents in the past. The chairman and the head of the BBC. There's still this issue about loaning money to the Conservatives,
Yeah,
or donating money to
still...
Conservatives, loaning money to Boris Johnson. I mean, that's not been resolved.
No.
What are you doing about that?
But people
It's
kind of
supposed to
hope
be,
those people,
yeah.
yeah, the people in power, they hope those stories will just go
Well,
away,
they won't.
and they do.
That's not going to go away. That one. I think he's going to be stepping down pretty soon. That guy.
I mean, the BBC are complicit in covering things up because they don't suit the government's agenda. It's a known fact. Like when you when you listen to the Today Show in the morning with Nick Robinson, when he has Michael Gove on or Jeremy Hunt, it's like they're mates having a drink round the pub. It's not like he's a journalist interrogating them, and it's like he's having a nice chat with his mates, which he is, because they all meet in the same places.
I mean,
They all
if
meet
you're going to
the same
have something like the BBC, it has to be totally independent of politics, doesn't it? I mean, it has to be like an organisation that is not involved in politics, is not controlled by the government of the day.
No,
You've got to totally separate it, and then it can be. Then you can claim that it's independent. But I mean, you've still got to look at who runs it and who, what its political leanings are. It's very difficult to find any news organisation that doesn't lean one way or the other. Maybe Reuters is a good example of how it should be.
Yeah, this is one thing. Another thing about the media and the BBC and all that is Rupert Murdoch's empire. Now it's all. I know I'm first to criticise Rupert Murdoch, and no one person should have that much power over the media. But actually, Rupert Murdoch isn't necessarily the bogeyman in this story. It's the BBC. Because the way the BBC want us to think about Rupert Murdoch is they're always doing these documentaries about him. But Rupert Murdoch was actually one of the first people to expose government corruption. And it was that Perfumo affair. And he serialised the diaries of Christine Keeler. And the government just wanted that story to go away. But Rupert Murdoch wouldn't let it. And whatever motivations Rupert Murdoch had, I don't think it was speaking truth to power. I think it was speaking truth to his own power. But the point is that the BBC likes to play, like you'll hear on Talk TV all the time and on GB News about, we need to scrap the licence fee, get rid of the BBC. That's their whole mantra, because Murdoch is part of that news world that the BBC likes to think it's better than or above. But really, they're not. The BBC are just as corrupt and scummy.
They need separating from politics. They need separating from this kind of...
It's a bit like the separation of church and state, isn't it? Like the dissolution of the newsrooms.
Yeah, and that, it's always Lord something or Lady something that's in charge of these things. It's always tying it back into those kind of...
Yeah, there's always a batshit baroness poking around.
That all needs to stop. Oh dear.
I went off a bit of a ramble there, but I think the reason was because we know that with the lead up to general election and a presidential election, we're going to see this ramping up, and that's what it's going to. So that's what you've got to keep your eye on.
These next two stories, bit of a content warning here because they both talk about
trigger warning,
suicide.
Seriously, serious stuff here.
Yeah, go on. This first one. Eden Knight, Saudi trans woman dies by suicide after being forced to detransition. Now, I think this is a story of somebody who was living in the States and was kind of forced to move back to Saudi. I'll just read out some of the article here. So, trans woman Eden Knight took her own life after allegedly being forced to detransition by members of her family. Reports of Knight's death were confirmed online by family members after she posted an essay entitled Final Message on her social media. Her body was reportedly found by her family, who referred to the death of a young man on Monday the 13th of March. Knight, 23, who lived in the US until last year, said in a Twitter post on Monday, seemingly scheduled in advance, that she had killed herself after being pressured into returning to Saudi Arabia, then denied access to her hormone medication. So it's, the post alleged that her parents hired American fixers and Saudi lawyers to take her back to the Middle East
This
kingdom.
family have clearly got connections, and a lot of
Yeah, I
money
don't
is
know anything much
changing
about
hands.
family or this
Yeah, I
person,
was,
but
I
it's
was,
a really sad story.
God, it's horrific. When I heard about this story, I was actually watching a live stream of somebody that talks about trans issues quite a lot, and it kind of came up in the chat, and I thought well, it was like a breaking news story, and the newspaper that broke it was the Independent. I thought that's a bit unusual because like the Independent are a very establishment right-leaning kind of news outlet. So it interested me to why it came to them first. So that tells you a little bit about this story and the power of that family and the connections. But at the heart of this story is just a tragedy of a young person that has committed suicide. And this is like a tip of the iceberg story because for every one of them she was well known on Instagram. She was she had this it's newsworthy because of her connections and but there'll be lots of people that are suffering in that same way that you don't have to be a Saudi family to have bigotry in it or do you know what I mean or of very restrictive ideas of what is acceptable and how you express yourself. That can happen in any family and it happens all the time. Now
Yeah.
not everybody will go to the extreme of suicide, but they will
But
alter
let me
their
just read out some of the stuff that she was going
they will
through.
alter their behavior, won't they, to
So,
fit in?
according to her message, she was contacted by fixers in the summer of 2022 to discuss the divide between her and her conservative Muslim parents. At the time, she'd been living with her friend Bailey Dawes after moving to the US to study. She'd come out as trans during the COVID-19 lockdown. After talking to the fixers online, Eden moved to temporary housing in Washington, D.C., alleged that she was coerced into detransitioning with the promise of shelter and food. Eden alleged that agents showed her examples of feminine men claiming they were hiding the desire to transition and it was somehow better this way. Additionally, she claimed they consistently berated her while saying that she looked like a man, which she said caused her to have a mental breakdown. Feeling the pressure, Eden Knight wrote that the only option was to detransition and return home. So it's obvious that she was under a lot of pressure by whoever these people were.
Yeah, it's just extreme
It's
kind of
extremely distressing.
and we know in some families that women are it's a patriarchal family situation and they take over the controlling of that and
Yeah.
that this exists in this country as it does in any and it's like people like I said people might not take that extreme choice of committing suicide but they'll be depressed and they won't function properly in society because people are not allowing them to express what it is they want to express and it's as simple as that, isn't it? It's like oppression.
Yeah.
And the other trigger warning story is another
So this
suicide.
next story is
It's a
another
trans
suicide
woman who
story.
fled Russia, who
Yeah.
was it in a Dutch a
So
refugee
trans
camp?
woman
Yeah.
who fled Russia dies by suicide in Dutch refugee camp. A young Russian trans woman reportedly took her own life in a refugee camp in the Netherlands after fleeing her anti-LGBTQ homeland. I think her name is pronounced Khina Zakharova.
Zakharova.
21, died on the evening of 27th February in a refugee camp in the northern Dutch town of Drachten, I think it's called, according to information shared by Dutch LGBT asylum support.
You have to be incredibly resilient to survive. I mean,
Yeah,
to
imagine
be
being
to
in a refugee
I
camp.
mean, we're so. I mean, we complain, don't we, about turfs on Twitter and shit like that. But it puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? Because all you've got to do is speak out and be anti-war or be, put in the wrong place or have the accident of being born in the wrong place, and your life is just completely parallel to what we deal with. And it's I would never play down any bigotry in this country. Obviously, we see the rise. We've got our eyes on the rise of the authoritarians and the far right. We can observe it because it's reported, and there's a lot of transparency. In some places, the news is just what you're. It's like we talked about the BBC being, but they are. I mean, they're not. They're nowhere near as what Russia is. Like Russian tanks will bomb transmitters if they think there's anything going out that the government doesn't approve of.
Yeah, pretty extreme.
But imagine if the BBC behaved like that. I mean, we're a bit far away from that, but the BBC are going in that direction. That's the general step, incremental. I'd say we're quite low down on the increments, but if you do follow that path, then say the BBC was the only,
So let me just read a bit more of this article here. She had reportedly applied for asylum in the Netherlands in December. It's been suggested that she had trouble accessing hormone treatment and antidepressant medication while in the camp.
When people say camp, it just makes me.
I know. Well, it's something like refugee camp processing centre.
Just
sure
because we know that word to me is so much.
No, it's the second person in the previous 6 weeks who's died by suicide in the Netherlands.
Yeah. And like I said, like we're talking about this because we're covering trans issues and these stories come on our radar. But for every
second refugee who's died by suicide.
Yeah, so this is the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? Because
it is.
This is what we know about. This is what we're allowed, or the as leaked out, or so for every story like this, there might be hundreds of others that. And what can you do? That's how we can sit here and conjecture about bloody Russian being horrible or whatever, or try and have a political stance on the Ukraine and all that. But really, these are human stories that seem to have always existed, and they never go away, do they? It's like there's always one country power hungry against another, and then the casualties of that are always just 21-year-old trans girls. Like, it's fucking ridiculous.
So another content warning for this next story, actually. This is about fascists.
Gosh. Yeah. You see that.
So I mean that image there on the screen there, that is, it's shocking to see people do that.
It is, but coming off the back of those two stories where we just talked about actual, when I use the word authoritarian a lot now because I avoid using fascist, because I think when I say fascist, it kind of.
Well, I mean that's a Nazi salute. It's not a fascist salute.
Yeah, I know, but this is, but it's. See, part of me. And because I understand situationism and I understand protest as a performative tool, I see it through that lens. Because when you see this happening in Western democracies, when you see this happening in countries where, freedom of speech is upheld, now what bit of freedom of speech allows this? Because if this was in Germany, if these people did that,
it would be shut down immediately.
They would be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could make the argument in a Western civilization that everything you want to do to express yourself, no matter what, should be allowed. Now, can we make that argument in this case? Because this is a protest, right? The event was Kelly J. Keen's.
So I mean the picture there, it's 30 members of the far-right National Socialist movement made their way down to Spring Street in support of Miss Khina Minshall's, Posey Parker thing that she's been doing in Australia. Another tour. So I mean, this story comes from News Corp Australia.
Yeah.
It's not.
Isn't that Rupert Murdoch's? Rupert Murdoch's.
Don't know who owns it actually. Let me just read a bit of the article here. It says large crowds of protesters from two competing rallies have clashed in the streets of Melbourne over LGBTQI issues as an anti-transgender activist, Kelly J. Keen Minshall, continues her speaking tour of Australia.
Mm.
Miss Keen Minshall, who goes by the moniker Posy Parker, is a British woman who founded the group Standing for Women. She describes herself as a women's rights activist, but she's mostly known for her anti-transgender opinions. It's not suggested she had any link with Saturday's violence, but her controversial views are believed to have sparked the tense clash between anti-trans and pro-trans activists in front of Victoria's Parliament House. And some of the images are,
but,
terrible.
Right. So there's been a lot of talk about Kelly J. Keane being linked to the far right and fascism.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's been
when
I've done it on Twitter, people have played it down and say that's not what she is. She's actually a niche thing. It's not really it's not connected, but we know it is. And I've been talking about why it is. And now for you to deny that, to say that the people, because when she was in America not long ago, she was having the same people turning up at her rallies.
Well,
so
I mean,
is she going to question herself? Is she going to say, "Oh God, maybe this has gone too far now"? Maybe
they are there in support of her. I mean, let me just read a bit more. The rally attracted a heavy police presence in the area, including officers from the Public Order Response Team and the Mounted Branch. The group of men dressed in black performed multiple Nazi salutes while holding a sign that read "Destroy Pedo Freaks." At least 30 members of the far-right Nationalist Socialist movement were seen marching down Melbourne's Spring Street in support of Ms. Keen Minshall. The men were all wearing black, and some of the marchers wore balaclava-type masks during the protest. The group was seen shouting slurs at transgender activists and performing the Nazi salute as they stood on the steps of Parliament. They're doing that in support of Kelly J. Keane.
But
the other thing that really surprises me is, why on earth did Australia let her in? She's known to be doing this in the US. She's now doing it. Why they let somebody in who's kind of
was a politician, I forgot his name, and
messages.
he was trying to stop her coming. He was.
The government should say, no, you're not coming in because you're going to be doing this kind of...
But they don't take it seriously because they believe they believe the message, let women speak. They believe that message is a feminist message and it's nothing to do with... That's why it's more insidious, because if she was honest and said, "Oh, I'm an exclusionist, I hate trans people, I don't want them to exist," that would be more, we'd be able to deal with that better. But the way she gets in the media and the way she gets a message across is by using the language of feminism as a smokescreen, and people fall for it, and people in the media pretend to fall for it. Like when she's on telly here, they use the same kind of language and codified kind of standing for women. Women need to speak up and protecting children and all these things. They're all bogus because the real message is hate. Now, I was saying for a long time that Kelly J. Keane is she a performance artist? There was something about Alex Jones about. But at the heart of these people is a motivation that is not good.
Okay, let's just if you were doing something like she's doing, and then this group showed up, wouldn't you put out some statement to say that they're not associated with me?
Well, she tries.
I don't agree with them. She's not done anything like that. She's not put out anything.
She relies on her little foot soldiers that she's created.
But she's not coming out and saying that these people shouldn't be doing this. She's not said that. Which, I mean, if you don't say something, that means what? That you agree with it? I mean, these people are there because of you.
But you see, my way of dealing with that is like the way to criticize it is I think about it in a creative way. So, like, I'm a woman, I can speak. So give me that microphone and I'll speak with you. And that will expose the fact that you don't want women to speak. You just don't want trans women to speak.
So
and
this tour is going to Perth, Brisbane, Melbourne, Adelaide, Hobart and Canberra, and then it's heading off to New Zealand.
And you see another issue in the media, like in the wider media and in the online kind of discourse about this, is there are philosophical arguments to be had about gender. There are things where say, what is a woman? You can legitimately ask the question, what is a woman? But it's being co-opted by people that just want to be abusive with it. So I could quite happily have a conversation about, is trans You know, how is somebody trans? What is that thing? What is the innate qualities of somebody that makes them gender non-conforming? But you can never have that conversation now because it's been so polluted and weaponized, and it's these little parasites that can make a little living off it that have kind of destroyed intelligent debate. Because I would quite happily sit down and have a conversation with somebody about some of the things Kelly J. Keane pretends to care about. But we can't have that conversation with her. You can't have it with Julie Bindel. You can't have it with Kathleen Stock, because the only motivation for them is exclusion and authoritarianism, and kind of it borders on terrorism, because when you start marginalizing people and pointing at certain people and saying they're the problem, you should go after them, they're the ones. It's like a kind of terrorism by proxy. Do you know what I mean? I know that's a really strong word, but when you've got these people doing Nazi salutes on the steps of government buildings in Australia, it ain't good. And she needs to start looking. And
well, I've moved on with the image because I couldn't stand looking at it anymore. But
no, because like, you know, for me personally, because you know, I'm always really careful about using the words fascism and Nazis and things like that, because I know that they are loaded. Now, I just really, you think this is a moment where you can't deny the link there. You just can't deny it. It's like what Gary Lineker said, oh, this government is like 1930s Germany. Well, there's some fucking truth to that, I'm afraid. And if the BBC can't handle it and they need to take him off air, that tells you quite a lot about the BBC.
Yeah.
And nothing about Gary Lineker.
Right, moving on. This next one is a bit lighter.
Thank God for that.
Thank God for that.
Can we have a drink?
Yeah, let's have a drink. Let's have a little
Take
drink.
a deep breath.
Take a deep breath. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this next one, trans filmmakers giving up on Hollywood and carving their own lane. Exciting stuff is happening. So I think this is around, you know, the fact that, you know, a lot of the movies that have come out of Hollywood in the past have been, you know, let's say, completely off the mark in terms of trans representation, etc.
Yeah. Tootsie.
Yeah. There's been some really bad examples, hasn't there? So let me just read out the headlines.
They sit within the time frame, some of them, don't they?
So it says the most exciting trans filmmaking is happening far away from the mainstream. The history of trans representation in cinema is a fairly bleak one, full of harmful stereotypes that reduce trans people to caricatures. Some films have tried to evoke reality, but instead fell flat by depicting a warped version of the realities of trans experiences. To make matters worse, many films that focus on trans stories have historically cast cisgender actors, overlooking talent in the transgender community. Representation can only improve if more trans folk are involved in the writing, producing, casting and acting process of a film. You know, that's all very true. So I think what's going on here is that they're just highlighting the fact that there's up and coming filmmakers who, you know, are kind of ignoring Hollywood and just doing their own thing.
Yeah, I think in a way though, from my perspective, I don't necessarily need there to be trans people in a film unless the film is about that. Like, I'm trying to think of a way of putting
you remember
this. But,
you remember the Danish girl?
Yeah.
Eddie Redmayne. I mean, he's come out and said it was a mistake and he's promised not to do it again. But I don't specifically have a problem with somebody playing a trans role if they're not trans. I mean, I understand that's valid, but the problem is there are no trans actors as such. So, wouldn't it be better to, you know, grow that side of the industry? You know, make sure that trans actors are being included. You know, if there were a lot of trans actors and they were actively in movies and things were being portrayed properly, then it would be okay for somebody like Eddie to do that. But when there's none of that, it's not.
You've got two things going on there. You've got trans representation, and then trans women don't necessarily identify as trans. It's just part of, a medical or a scientific way of describing. So there are women in cinema that I'm more likely to be inspired by. Do you know what I mean? Than just because you know what I mean? There's that thing of somebody being trans and then a trans actor and trans representation is it's a bit more nebulous in acting and a trans role because obviously there is a spectrum of that. And but I know why it's like what's the actress called that was in Orange is the New Black? The black lady. I forgot her name now. But if they're good actors
It
and they
was
just get on,
Living Cox, wasn't it?
we don't need to notice the trans bit. We just need to notice there's a good actor. And if you're not playing if you're not playing a story, if it's not part of the story that somebody is trans, it doesn't matter. It's like this film that's come out recently called The Whale about somebody that's struggling with obesity, and I'm thinking this is terrible. It's just disgusting, really. And it's like, I can understand why the Academy wants to award.
But I think, but like I say, I think the problem is that lack of representation is the problem. There's just not that many trans actors. And then you got and then the stories are terrible. The way it's kind of the way the stories are told, it's always the criminal or the evil trans person or the story's always based on them being trans and not just based on normal things.
But I think there's something more. You see, when you deal with film and it's an artist, is it? I'm trying to think of a film, but is it a documentary type of thing, or is it something where it's an artistic expression? Because to me, the best films are all gender non-conforming. They're kind of not specific to. Do you know what I mean? It's not about men and women. It's not about. It's about something bigger than all that. The actors are just there to tell a story. And if you start bringing identity into it when it's not necessarily part of the story, I don't think that matters.
I think if there's a trans character in a film, obviously it's going to be portrayed better by somebody who is trans. It's going to be more authentic. That's a fact.
I'll tell you what I want to see. I want to see a John Wick style film where the lead role is a trans woman and she just gone on a massive revenge rampage against anybody that ever called her a man.
I support that.
I'm going to make that film. Fund me. I'll be in it.
But if you were to think about this in terms of other categories, would you have an able actor playing a disabled role? You wouldn't, would you?
Well, you see, it's like the tip of the iceberg.
There's like why? I mean, I can understand this from both sides of the argument.
It's great. You know what?
The problem is there's not enough trans actors.
It's great to see people on screen.
And if you are going to do
that are aspiring,
if you're going to do a trans character, make sure you do it right. But I would, I think it's always better to have a trans actor doing a trans role because it's going to be more authentic and it's going to support trans actors and there's just not enough of them. But until you've got to that kind of parity level, I don't think you should allow non-trans people to play those roles. But it's going to be a long time before we get to that level.
No, I don't think there's enough people I mean, I don't know, but the thing is with me, if the character's inspiring.
If it's done well,
I want to see an inspiring woman. I don't want to see an inspiring somebody just.
Don't want any negative stories. Don't want any kind of
that'd be a
stereotypical.
Good start. Yeah. So that's the actual
starting point, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the real point. Stop using trans as a stooge.
Yeah.
Stop using trans as part. Trans women can be funny, but not because they're trans.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So go watch the Disclosure film, and then come back and revisit this topic. And you'll understand.
There are very few films, right, with powerful, strong female characters that are not also some kind of victim. Because if you look at like I was talking about, have you seen Kill Bill?
Yeah.
And it's like there's always got to be some trauma and then emancipation kind of story. I said, well, why can't women just be strong? You know what I mean? Why do they have to have been beaten? Why do they have to be beaten, raped, and abused,
Exactly.
and then have to come through the other end? You know,
Yeah.
that's why I like films, like Steel Magnolias, and I like films that have a real kind of. Have you ever seen the film Serial Mom?
Serial Mum. No, I'm not saying that.
No, it's about she's like a middle class suburban housewife who becomes a serial killer. No, that being a say, I don't want to inspire anybody to be a serial killer,
No,
but
no. I was
the
going to say.
point is, the point is that's the metaphor for like breaking out of that suburban kind of everything's pretentious kind of world. So that's why I like that film. But there are
So
loads of
yeah.
films
So
with
I
it.
guess no more tragic storylines or scaremongering against the community is what we're saying, right?
Mm. Let's have some good quality, you know,
Yeah.
strong and proud characters.
So this next one, Joyland.
Yeah.
So this is a trans film, and one of its executive producers is Malala Yousafzai.
Mm.
But the film has been banned in Punjab. So let me just read the article. It's quite an
No
interesting one. This.
surprise.
So Malala Yousafzai has spoken in defence of Joyland, a film about trans love that has been banned in Punjab. Joyland was to be banned across Pakistan after the government rescinded the film's censorship certification. A statement from the Information and Broadcasting Ministry wrote that the decision came after written complaints of highly objectionable material which went against decency and morality. Although the government made U-turn on this decision on Wednesday, the 16th of November, the Punjab Information and Cultural Department has released a follow-up stating maintaining its ban. It means the film won't be released anywhere in the Punjab region, including the city of Lahore where the film is based. So, first of all, I was surprised that Malala Yousafzai was involved in this film as an executive producer. I mean, I didn't know she did that kind of stuff. She's written in defence of the film. When a film like Sadaq's rises up working class of trans characters and women struggling to assert themselves against rigid and very real social norms, we turn away. In doing so, we reject the spectacular talent of Pakistani artists that a film like Joyland represents. So, yeah, I mean, it's great to see somebody like Malala involved in that. And, it kind of ties into the previous story about people moving away from Hollywood to try and do these films.
Yeah.
But then it gets banned in somewhere like Punjab region, because of religious sentimentalities, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's not really about trans representation, because this is a story about, films in as a documentation, as a documentary, and like I always think it's really like, because why it's good. I mean, I'm glad that it's getting made, and I want to see it, but I want to see things that are not related to so many tragedies. I think it's like sometimes I'll watch a film with my mum, and it's not just the fact that there's no gay representation or trans representation. It's just because a lot of films are kind of created by a kind of what would you say, like a committee of writers, and they tend to be male. And a lot of stories don't get made because there's no, they don't think they're going to appeal to anybody, but because obviously you have to make money if you're a filmmaker, and there's a big gamble on making something that doesn't appeal to millions of people.
There's just a bit I want to read out here. The film, starring transgender actress Alina Khan, who plays Biba, a trans starlet, was the first Pakistani film to be selected for Cannes Film Festival. It follows Haider, which was played by Ali Junjo, a married man who falls in love with Biba after joining a dance troupe and had been put forward for an Oscar consideration. So Khan also spoke about the band, telling The Guardian, I've been very sad. There's nothing against Islam, and I don't understand how Islam can be endangered by mere films. Can also opened up about her experiences growing up as a transgender person in Pakistan, adding, "My family did not accept me, but neither did society."
Mm.
You know,
Well, they say,
Joyland received standing ovations and accolades at Cannes. So it sounds like a really good film. I don't think it's out yet, but
film's really powerful, isn't it? If cinema and media is really powerful. So the reason people get, I mean, she said a mere film, but the reason is there's always negative reaction is because people understand the power of a message like that.
I think it might have come out in November, but I've not seen it advertised anywhere. Keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah. Well, I tried Netflix. Joyland. It's not there.
Yeah, I had a look. It's not there. We'll definitely watch that one.
So we're going to talk. What was that? Are we going to talk about this virtual trans summit?
Yes, that is the next one.
This is a weird story for me because I'm not like it. What it is, it's like a professionals kind of trans professionals getting together to have a bit of a powwow. I don't know. You know what?
PinkNews is hosting this. It's going to be the first virtual trans plus summit for workplace professionals. So PinkNews is pleased to announce it'll be hosting a virtual. It's all online. This virtual trans plus summit on Thursday, 11th of May, all day, 9 till 5, and it's being sponsored by EY and Publix. So there's several kind of well-known speakers from the community that are going to be, speaking and presenting. Rico Jacob Chance, Ella Slade, Rachel Rees, Tate Smith.
It's all positive. I think.
Yeah, it's all positive. I think
the cost of the event is something that
tickets are quite expensive. I think so. If you're not being sponsored by your company, I don't think individual trans people will be able to or willing to pay to attend it. I think it's like 170 quid a ticket. It's all online. I'm just wondering why that is. I mean, I'm absolutely behind the event and what they're doing. I mean, just to read out what it's about. It's very corporate
event, and it's like, I suppose it's like, they can set the price. They think it's a market. If there's a market for it, that's the price. I mean, they produce the ticket price if they didn't sell anyway.
Costs, of course, but the summit, which is the first event series of its kind in the UK, offers businesses, not-for-profits, charities and HR professionals the opportunity to improve their knowledge of the trans and non-binary community, as well as be provided with a foundation level understanding of what support and actions are required in the workplace. So there's speakers there from Wix, EY, Global Butterflies, Transactional UK, IBM. So there's some big companies, big organisations, Trevor Foundation. So it's what they're doing, and the reasons for doing it are great. The only thing that I'm a bit, why they're doing that is why they're charging so much. It's an online event, maybe 40 quid would have been better or something. I don't know.
No idea, to be honest. I mean, this isn't something I would normally know about, but I'm sure you've been to these kind of things.
Well, I mean, I've been to Trans in the City. I mean, that comes with a ticket, but it's free if your corporation has sponsored it, or you get a ticket for free for whatever reason. I mean, these events are great for promoting trans and non-binary issues within corporates, but what I worry about is the fact that if you're not involved in that area and you are trans, you won't be able to attend this because it's expensive. Well, I can't imagine anybody who's struggling at the moment with the way things are being able to afford £175 ticket to do an online event for the day. It's I don't know.
It's a very small club of people that can. But in a way, you kind of hope that maybe something positive will come of this.
I hope so.
Like, say you're working for a company and they can afford to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, the things they're doing with it are all amazing, great.
I'm not sure what the outcomes are, but I mean,
a bit disappointed with the price. Because I won't be able to attend.
I'm not sure what the trans element of this is. I mean, like sure.
I mean, I won't be able to attend because I know that although my company do sponsor things, they probably wouldn't sponsor me for this. Because it's kind of it's a bit of a, I don't know, it's a bit of a one-off online event. Other online events I attend and nobody has to pay for.
See,
So I don't know. I mean, it's just a bit strange. If you were going to if you went to a place where it's actually a physical event and they're feeding you and giving you drinks, and it's kind of like a corporate, I can understand why you have to pay a little bit more. But this is online. I mean, it's like I know I won't be attending. I'd like to, but I'm not going to spend that much myself.
But, I mean, obviously they have costs and whatever they want to charge. It's up to them. It's a free market.
Free market.
And they business people know all about that.
Yeah.
But the thing for me about something like the only time I've ever really known anything, like, is when I've done stuff with the union, which is a completely different kettle of fish, really. But like when they'll have a panel, but you have to pay a little bit to be a part of towards the event or something like that, and it's like network opportunities, aren't they? Really, and
no, but
as long as
this
that
event,
filters
though,
down to the employees.
But this event, it's got some really heavy-duty corporates in it. Surely they could fund it for everybody who wanted to attend.
Yeah, and this might just be the most boring story we've ever.
It might be. It's the most corporate story we've ever done. But if you've got companies, along the lines of the ones being involved in this, these are big international companies who could, waive fees and say, yeah, okay, it's going to be free for everybody. Anybody who wants to come along, come along. You can restrict numbers. I'm not saying don't restrict your numbers if you need to, but does it really need to be that expensive? £175 for an online event? Yeah.
Is it going because it's not like there's going to be a disco after with some bingo and entertainment.
But the speakers are great. I mean, Tate Smith, I met Tate. Yeah, really nice guy.
Whenever I go to an event, whenever I go to a thing, my first question is, when's the bingo? when's the raffle?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of really out of my remit, that kind of corporate world, but
I'm sure it's going to be good. I'm hoping maybe they'll put it out, the information later for free. Maybe that's how they're going to do it. I don't know.
Maybe this next story I'll have something more to say about the Woman of the Year.
So our last story
to
for
pronounce
today.
This. Is it Megan Rapinoe?
I think it's Rapine.
Right, okay.
Not quite sure.
Yeah.
There's been some difficult pronunciations today.
Rapinoe. Did I get that right? Yeah.
So
Megan, World Cup with
let's just call her Megan.
Icon. Megan has
dedicates her Time Woman of the Year award to the trans community. Two-time World Cup winner, lesbian icon Megan Rapinoe has dedicated her prestigious Woman of the Year award to the transgender community.
That's amazing.
She's been outspoken about equal pay in sports alongside LGBTQ rights.
I'm just looking her up on Twitter now because I'll be honest with you, I hadn't heard of this person before you mentioned it to me earlier.
Yeah, well, if you'd watched the Women's World Cup, you'd probably know about her.
I mean, there are a lot of people in that event.
Yeah. Addressing the audience at the gala, the football star said, "We all know what's going on in our country, and with the attempted erasure of trans people." She then proceeded to dedicate the award to the transgender community. So I'm not sure if that means we're all going to get to hold it for a weekend or not. I don't know, but
it just means there's somebody out there who's thinking about. She's seen, people see what goes on in the media. She's probably got friends who are trans and non-binary, and she reads Twitter a bit, and it's just a way of saying, yeah, we've got you back, because these events like the World Cup, they're huge events, aren't they? And they get a lot of criticism when they try and include or do something positive for the LGBTQ community. And I think it's great when somebody with a platform, with a kind of media clout that somebody like that can have.
I mean, she's come out with some really kind of supportive statements.
There are a lot of people out there, though, that have so much media power, and they just use it for really negative, pointless lobbying for things that actually harm people.
So let me just read out some of the things she's been quoted as saying. Rapine praised I'm going to say Rapine, that might be wrong, I don't know. But she praised the trans community, saying, "The way they refuse to live their life any other way than completely whole is so inspiring. I'm inspired by the invitation to be completely myself. They offer us a full view of what it means to be human in the world. a whole opportunity to be the crazy ass human beings that we are. That's
Crazy
a
ass
great
human
gift.
beings.
Crazy
I
ass
like
human
that.
beings.
I'm definitely a crazy ass human
You
being.
are. I think she was talking about you.
You see, I'd like to think, if I was a sports star or if I was, had a bit of clout, I'd be out there and I'd be, doing. It's not a big gesture, is it? It's not like a big deal to just say, you know what? Can you just be a bit nicer to the trans people? That's all it comes down to.
I mean, she didn't have to do that, did she? But she's,
But you see, the thing is,
it's a
like,
nice thing to do.
you'll notice, like, in the big, call it big media, like on the BBC, and you got people like Piers Morgan and this, and they're always asking celebrities like loaded questions, which they it's like clickbait all the time, and getting celebrities to venture opinions on things that they know sod all about, and then they'll repeat that story as if it's come out of their mouth without prompting. So that happened. It happened a lot, when they were asking about what do you think do you think trans women are women and things like that. So if you're not clued up with the debate and you just ask a random celebrity like that, they'll say, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure about that." And should trans women be in sport and women's sports? They'll probably say, "Oh, I don't know about that because there's some sort of disparity." And if they just venture rather than saying, "Oh, I don't know," they'll make the mistake and then they'll get doubled down on it and they'll go into this period of being attacked for it. And then how do they deal with that? Sometimes some of them go completely anti-trans then because they've been dragged into a debate they didn't even want to be in. But that's what I say. So, why are they not? I mean, I know I'm being idealistic and I know I'm being a bit like, oh God, why isn't the world out just how I want it? But it feels like there are so many people that could just say, oh, hang on a minute. Do you know what I mean? Like, why isn't Fiona Bruce leaning over the table and going, for fuck's sake, can you just shut up? Leave me alone. I just want to value the antiques.
What was that other program she used to do with the art?
Fake or fortune?
Oh, Fake or Fortune, yeah.
That was my tweet. Fiona Bruce, fake or fortune? ? Both is the answer.
It was very upper middle class.
See, we don't know. Like, let's not pick on Fiona Bruce. We don't know Fiona Bruce. We're not allowed to know Fiona Bruce because Fiona Bruce is not allowed to have an opinion of her own because she works on the BBC. But when is
that the way the BBC's going? If you work for the BBC, you can't have an opinion. Doesn't matter what area of the BBC you work in.
No,
you just can't have an opinion unless it matches the corporate stance.
Was it last Thursday on Question Time when somebody mentioned Boris Johnson's dad? Being had a history of domestic violence, and she had to go, hang on a minute. She was sort of like, oh, we need both sides of this argument. So,
that's what she got in trouble with.
Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we?
We did.
Backtracking a bit.
Anyway, we're back to our full size selves now.
Right. Well, I'm going to say that there was a lot of heavy topics.
There was a lot of
heavy
topics.
We're talking about, obviously, I'm not going to start going on about Sally Keane too much again because I just think it's reached a point now where it's beyond the pale. And I've done a lot of moaning and writing and generally just wasting my time on it. And what I feel like now is like I just see it all as a bad joke. And I wish some people, like, if you look at the way the Australian media have looked at her, that's the way our media should be looking at her. Yeah. And Julie Bindel and Kathleen Stock and Helen Joyce and Graham Linehan. And who said Gary Glisser then? I don't want to confuse those two people. Graham Linehan. And that's how a media should be doing the same job. But what is different? What is the difference in Australia? Is they're not centralised as a media group, are they?
I don't know.
When people say
I don't know a lot about that particular Australian media outlet that we quoted there. But
all the newspapers and media sources we get come out of probably one or two streets in London.
It did seem to be one of the only articles that I've seen recently which does actually point out the realities of what was going on there.
At the T-junction...
I don't think we'd be seeing that on the BBC, would we?
At the T-junction of Fleet Street is Tufton Street and Westminster. And make of that what you will. And on that note, on that bombshell, that was me dropping my mic.
That wasn't your mic, it was your vape. Anyway.
Vape drop.
Vape drop. That's a new thing there. A vape drop.
I'm really sorry about that story about corporate trans people doing corporate things. That was her idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing that they're doing. My only problem with it is the price of the online tickets. That's just like, what is going on there?
Well, it's a corporate event, and
I guess if it's just for corporate people with company sponsorship, maybe it's okay. But
it might, you know what? You never know, Vicky. You might buy a ticket, and it'd be absolutely amazing. You might meet somebody at that event that could change your life. And I'm not being facetious. That can happen because, like, when I've been to random events and just the only reason I was on that panel at the LGBT Foundation last week was because I met one person who said, "Would you like to do it?" Because I've seen the stuff you've been doing, and that's it. You might just meet one random person or get in a conference with. This is the thing about it being online, though, that bothers me because that's a bit of a less, you know what I mean? It feels a bit more impersonal, but that, lots of things. I'm not going to keep going on about that, but
no.
Anyway, yeah. So I think you've got to go shopping now, haven't you?
I do. Yes, I got to go off to the shops and buy some stuff.
I've got to assemble a new computer.
Are you going to try and make this one work? This is like the third attempt, isn't it?
No, yeah, I bought a laptop that was rubbish. Then I bought a PC and I bought the wrong spec because I want to use a 4K camera so everybody can see how beautiful I am, obviously. But it's going to show me flaws, isn't it? 4K. I better wear more makeup and get more injections.
Or you could just move further away from the camera.
Right, I'm going now.
Right, I'm going to sign us off.
Before I make more of a fool of myself.
So thanks for watching.
Right, bye for now.
Don't forget to subscribe. Are we going to do the song?
Are we doing the song? Oh yeah, ready? 1, 2, 3. Don't forget
to subscribe.
You'll never get this right. Right. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll try again next time.
Bye for now.
Don't forget to support your local trans person and give them lots of money.
Not going to happen. Bye.